Hi everyone. Well, I'm actually showing my face this time. Thank you for joining me, and I've been asked to do a short demonstration on the watercolor markers, which I use in my journals, and I was just going to show you. This is all watercolor markers. I've already done a short video on my journals, so the questions came up about using the markers. Is that the right way around? No, that is. Now, the thing is with all of you have probably used watercolor markers or alcohol markers anyway, and they do behave differently. Alcohol markers can be pretty garish with the colors. Plus, you can't diffuse them with water, they're alcohol. So you could diffuse them with turpentine or some sort of agent that is going to loosen up the alcohol in the markers. But the watercolor markers that I use are Winsor and Newton. And this is what they look like. And they have a brush end which is still stiff. It's not like a flexible brush, but it's larger than this end, which is like a drawing point. I mainly use the fat end of the marker, and I use a water brush, which you can fill. Most of you know about this, but you can fill these with water. It's a vessel that holds the water, and take it on plein air painting, and you just squeeze it out, squeeze the water out of the brush, and diffuse as you go. So you don't need to carry a lot of water vessels with you. You've got something here. It's just a quick, easy way to travel. And I have bunches and bunches of my markers here. So let's get on with this, and I'll just show you how to apply this. You have to remember that with watercolor markers, you're working with them like almost like a pencil. So the palette is the paper that you're working on, instead of having a palette beside you, although you can use it like a palette too, and I will show you how to do that too. I keep a little bit of scrap paper beside me just in case I want to use it like a palette, and I'll put the watercolor marker onto that scrap paper and I'll diffuse it with water and then dip my brush into that, and I can use it that way. So rather than talking about it, let's get on with it, okay? So I would normally start with a little preliminary sketch with a 2B pencil, and I'd sort out the colours I want to use with my markers. These ones are lemon yellow, sap green and mid blue. And start the process. One colour over the top of another colour, and I start with a light colour first, always. So I started with the lemon yellow, and I'm now putting sap green into it. And the process I start with is just a little bit at a time, maybe a dot or a dash every now and then I use the brush with water and start diffusing it. And here's where I use the paper itself as a palette. Watch what I do. I pick up some of the colour and transfer it to another area. So that way I'm getting a different value of that colour. So now I'm going to add the mid blue, and this is the so-called shadow side of the trees, and start working that colour in. Same process, a little dot or a dash here and there, and then diffuse it. At this stage I will say that some of the colours take a little bit more nudging than others to diffuse, especially the blues. So once the water has subsided into the paper, it's going to be easier for you to move the paint. I now add a little bit of burnt sienna for the tree trunks, and I will add some burnt umber to that, just a little bit, and then I'll start diffusing that and transfer some of the marks into the areas of the mass of the trees to indicate branches. A little bit of raw sienna or yellow ochre is added now, just to give the cluster of trees a little bit more believability. A little bit of yellow ochre, and then permanent rose, and then some cerulean blue at the bottom line of the trees as a cast shadow, and I'll diffuse that, and then I'll move into the sky. Now onto the sky. Cerulean blue, and I'm going to nudge that and make sure that I transfer a lighter value of it to other areas in the sky, and then I'll add a little bit of permanent rose and some more cerulean blue. So basically that's about all you have to do. I mean, this little sketch was done in a matter of seconds, really, not very long, building up and building up one colour over another. And you noticed that I didn't just paint everything in the one colour. I did little dots every now and then because I knew I could pick that colour up with my brush. That's important, I think, with the watercolour markers, because if you just go and fill in everything and then diffuse it, it won't be quite as natural looking. I find that you get a degree of value, different values, if you pick up some of the colour with your brush and move it to another area and keep it pretty watered down. So then you're going to get a nice value change, a transitional value. And as with most watercolours, this will also dry in a much more faded look to what you anticipate. So you might have to go in and nudge it a little bit more. I plan on working much more into this with some dark contrasts, and maybe do something with the foreground. I mean, it's a little landscape, it doesn't really matter, it's just a little bit of fun. So, and I'm totally winging it, I'm making it all up as I go, so I hope that you're getting the general idea of what happens. I mean, normally out in the field you would sketch it out first, as much detail as you want, and then you can start systematically just doing your watercolour markers as you work the painting up. It's just a matter of patience and being a little bit more adventurous with your colours, because it's a bit of a surprise sometimes when you get these markers on the surface and they're a lot stronger than what you think. But now you can see how you can change them and diffuse them quite a bit as you go. So I start to think about a midground and a foreground for this little landscape. And as I'm winging it, I really don't have any reference. I'm just kind of making this up as I go. Just building up my colours, same way as I did the background, and letting the landscape or the painting tell me what to do. One colour over another, that was permanent rose with the yellow ochre over the top, and really building up my darks now as I get closer to the viewer. Keep on diffusing and adjusting and moving around that paint, picking it up in my brush and transferring it to other areas. I find that's one of the easiest ways of approaching these watercolour markers. And always leaving, of course, the underneath washes showing through, so you're getting a nice demarcation between them. On the right hand side now, and I'm working with yellow ochre and a little bit of raw sienna, and just sort of scribbling my way through it, putting a little bit of my repeat colours into the same area. my magenta and my permanent rose. A little bit of cadmium yellow, this one is, not just the lemon yellow. And just a word of warning, sometimes they pick up a bit of colour on the end of the tip that had a bit of green on the end of that yellow marker. It doesn't worry me because I'm going to put green here anyway, but you might need to clean some of the tips. If you've used a yellow with a green, you might pick up colours. So keep an eye on that because it will transfer for you. And just keeping on diffusing and making my watercolour all blend, keeping a lot of white of the paper still showing through. A little bit of sap green now, and I'm just putting a couple of strokes of it, you'll notice, because this is a pretty powerful colour. And then I'm going to add my lemon yellow to it, and then I'm going to diffuse it. And this is where I can use this colour for a transfer colour as well. So keep on diffusing and moving it around so it gets a lighter value of it. And then I can start dipping my brush into it and transferring it as a lighter version of that colour into the background. I think by now, after watching the process, you've gotten the idea that it's a build-up arrangement with these colours, one colour over another. And obviously the colours that are coming closer to the viewer are going to be a little bit more intense and a little bit darker in value. I may still use a little bit of ink line in the end of this, I'm not sure, and see if, see how I feel. I might delineate a little bit of it with a bit of a fine tip marker as well. And I'm going to use a drinking straw in a couple of seconds and just put it on that green area there in the foreground so that we get a little bit of linear attention there. And then I'm just about done. Now, as you can see, this is a pretty light rendition of a little landscape. I mean, it's just to show you the way you can build up your colours, but it can be built on. I'm waiting until it dries, and then it can be built on even more. What you mustn't do is dip these into the water and do it, because you'll dilute the watercolour in the tip of this and it will probably stop working for you. It might come back again later when it's dry, but it's not a good idea to dip this into the water. You just kind of work the layers up the way I have showed you, and hopefully that gives you some insight as to how you can work with these wonderful markers. I'm surprised that not many more people use them. I think they're great. The alcohol markers are also great, as I said, but they're very garish with your colours. You can't usually get these soft colours with the alcohol markers. They punch you in the face with their colour intensity, usually, because they're inks, whereas this is watercolour. So I hope it helps, and I hope you feel enthused enough to try this wonderful gadget or technique. And till the next time, over and out. Bye. Thanks for watching.